Well, good morning, church. Marvelous. Clara, how are you? They do that every Monday. I get up here, and they want to start a conversation. And I like that. It's fun. It's Clara. Well, good morning. If we have not met, my name is Drew. I'm the youth pastor here at Waypoint Church, and Tim and I did a little swap-a-rooney today. Good job, Tim. Thanks for doing that. Tim mentioned this morning that we had some technical challenges this morning. Basically what happened was our projectors and stuff was not working right. And we were turning stuff off and on again, and I'm texting John Fritch, and he's saying words that I don't understand. And it turns out all of these problems that we were having were being caused by one component, the video card. How stupid is that? I was like, video card, of all the problems to have. We have a backup plan, but it took us a little bit of gears turning to get it going. But Katie May, you're a rock star. Thanks for having a good attitude and helping make all that happen so that now we have words. So that's cool. There was an announcement that didn't get into the announcements, and it was my fault, not Alicia's. But tomorrow night at youth group, we are having a game night. So if you're a youth and you're like, I only go to youth group sometimes because usually it's boring, tomorrow night's a game night, so you can come. And if you're like, I have friends that I want to invite, but they don't really like the idea of doing like a churchy thing, this is your chance to invite them. Get them here, help them see that we are only 80% as weird as they think we are. Okay? So anyway, and it's not just any game night, it is mac and cheese night. So we are going to take a giant container and cook mac and cheese in it and then feed it to the children. And it's going to be a fun time. Jonah's excited. I'm excited too. So anyway, here's my whole sermon this morning. Trust God. Trust God. Easy to say, simple to consider, but harder to put into practice when circumstances crash in on us. It's really easy for us to say, I trust God, or to tell God, I trust you. Or there's a song that we've sang quite a few times that has this line in it that goes, I will trust in you. It's us saying that to God. I will, future tense, trust in you. We say these things, but then we curb our bets with our own securities and insurance policies. Most of us, if God were to suddenly fail us, in a practical sense, we would have some kind of a backup plan. We would, God's going to provide, but just in case, we've got options. It's a product of history, just as much as it is our nature, especially here in America, the land of the free. We worship the idol of self-sufficiency. We love the hardworking, self-made man, don't we? And that there's nothing wrong with hard work, okay? That the Bible tells us that hard work is something to pursue, something to seek after. But we love the idea of somebody who doesn't need help from anybody. We love the idea of saying, I got where I am today because of the sweat of my brow, and I don't owe anybody nothing. We love that. We love that. We love to be able to say that we're self-made. And so I think sometimes we can come to this idea of saying, I trust God and I believe in him, but I didn't actually need his help to get where I am. As humans, we don't naturally like the idea of fully surrendering ourselves to him. And the reason why that is very simple, and it's because we don't trust him. We think that we can do better sometimes. Anybody ever been around somebody or maybe a boss or a teacher who had serious control issues? or want to confess that maybe sometimes you yourself has had serious control issues. Don't raise your hand too high, just a little baby raise. You see, people that fall into this control, this worship of control, they like the idea of God, but we don't like the idea of taking our hands off the wheel. We might say, God, here, you take control, you can have the driver's seat, but I'm going to still hold the wheel because I'm afraid that you might steer us somewhere that I'm not quite on board with. I want to still be in control. I still want to dictate my own destiny. Whatever good I accomplish in my life, it will be because I. And that's where we get it wrong. We don't like the idea of fully surrendering to God because we don't fully trust him. And especially in the West, in the first world where we live, most of us aren't wondering where our next meal is going to come from. Even in the tumultuous economy, which seems more and more like everything is more expensive than a normal person can practically afford, right? Even in that, we're still doing pretty good. You can pray to God that he will provide for you, but just in case, you'll be okay. We've got options. What if there is no backup plan? What if you're stuck between, let's say an impassable sea and the greatest military force on the planet? Obviously, I'm talking about Israel and the Red Sea. If that's not obvious, I apologize. But what do people do when they find that they can't do it themselves anymore? When are people more likely to cry out to God? In a moment of despair, when they're desperate, when death is looking at them in the face. There's this video that went viral online of this guy getting chased by a cougar. I don't ever want to be chased by a cougar, but you can hear the despair in his voice that in the midst of profanity, come on guys, he's being chased by a cougar, comes in slack, all right? In the midst of that, he realizes that if it comes down to going one-on-one with a cougar, the odds aren't great. And so, his little pocket knife or whatever it is he has with him isn't going to do him a whole lot. This happens. People cry out when they're desperate. And the reason why is because when you're desperate, you realize that you can't put your trust in the other things that you thought you could put your trust in. And you start to understand that the only option left is whether or not God will choose of his glorious divine will to rescue you. And if you're here today and you are a Christian, that means that God has chosen to rescue you. Okay? Let's remember that. One thing that I have said from this pulpit a few times is that virtually all of our problems as a human race can be directly attributed to an individual or collective failure to trust in God. And you can take that all the way back to Eden. You can take Adam and Eve saying, okay, God, we hear you. We love this garden that you've made for us, but we think we can do better. We think we can know what God knows. And you can follow the story from there. Cain, the people who mocked Noah, and then after the flood, all the generations that follow, Jacob, Esau, all the way on down to where we are here in the story, staring at the Red Sea. You've got people saying, yeah, God, I see you and I like you, but I don't totally trust you, and so I'm going to take control for myself. I like to spoil my sermons in advance because people have short attention spans. And so here's your spoiler. What I want you to take from this message today is that you, when you leave this place, would put all of your trust in the Lord because he has proven himself faithful in his deliverance of the Israelites on his time. And that's important. As a collective, and you can use any collective you want, the human race, Americans, Christians, the church, we have this condition where we don't like to collectively trust God. Now, how does God respond to this? Historically, when his power is challenged on a worldwide scale, how does he respond? Well, historically, he responds by proving his faithfulness. In history, he proves that he is the one and only God. Every time challenged, he says, "You will know that I am the Lord." Okay? When challenged, he does this. Every time we've tried to put someone else or something else, be it a political system or a philosophy, on a pedestal to rival God, it fails. Giants, storms, false gods, dictators, kings, presidents, and governors all have fallen inferior. And if we're using a historical context, most of these people are dead. And God is not. All right? When the plagues came in Egypt, he proved to the Egyptians that he controls the forces of every one of their false gods. And he's going to do it again. A question to challenge yourself and myself, for all of us. Do you believe that he is who he says he is? And do you believe that he will do what he says he will do? Those are simple questions, but what does this mean? What did he say he will do? And who does he say that he is? What does that mean for me to truly believe that he will do? We say things like, God is faithful and he keeps his promises. Okay, well, what promises? What are we talking about here? That I'm going to be prosperous and rich and that my business is going to succeed? Yeah. Maybe. If God chooses to bless you with that, great. Run with it. Live life with an open hand, right? But let's not get sidetracked. Who he says he is and that he will do what he says we'll do. What is that? He is God, all-powerful, all-knowing, and he has a plan for this world and for his holy people that involves us being with him in his kingdom. And that he promises to make right what is wrong and to make his people set apart for his glory. And that our pain and our hunger is temporary. When we talk about deliverance across the board, that's all of us. That's not just some. That's all believers. It's everyone who has put their faith and hope in the Lord Jesus Christ. So as we read this story about the Israelites and the crossing of the Red Sea, they're going to get a massive victory story here. This story is going to be a story that they tell their grandkids and their great-grandkids. It's going to get passed along from generation to generation. And when they're facing fire, they're going to point back to this and say, remember when God parted the Red Sea? There's an internet, a website that I like to go to, a theological website that I often go to for reference. And this guy had an article about this, and he actually said quite boldly and emphatically that the parting of the Red Sea is the single greatest act of salvation that God performs in the Old Testament. Okay, so I'm sure there's a debate to be had, but if we're talking about grand scale, let's talk movie budget, right? Like if we were going to make a movie about this and have it be full budget, it would take a lot of special effects, to make this scene, right? I always refer to that movie, The Prince of Egypt. It's a cartoon, but I think they executed a few points really, really well, and one of those is the parting of the Red Sea. If you watch, every time I watch that scene, even though it's a cartoon, it gives me chills every time. I think about understanding that this is one artist's imagining of what this event might have looked like. Understand? It's for like when you're watching The Chosen. Like it is not scripture, but it kind of gives you an idea. It might have been like this, right? It's a big event, okay? So the Israelites are going to get a big victory story. Now the Israelites, it's important for us to remember that the Israelites endured generations of slavery in Egypt, but God's timing is perfect, not ours. So as we read this, something I'd like us all to consider is, do you have a victory story? Do you have a victory story? Have you been delivered? And then, of course, and I'll remind you at the end, share that story. If you're the one waiting for deliverance in a practical sense, I'm not talking big deliverance, I'm talking a situation you're in right now in your life, a physical ailment, anything that you are surviving right now. That's what we're talking about. If you're waiting for deliverance from that, the simple and easy advice is, well, put your trust in God, because he sees more than you see, and he knows more than you know, and he's got a plan that's a lot bigger than whatever plan I could come up with. Now, it's hard to look at somebody who's in the midst of that and tell them, well, you just need to trust God. So my advice is not to go to somebody in the midst of affliction and tell them what they need to do. My advice is to go to that person and be there for them and pray with them, sit next to them, cry with them, be there for them, and remind them of God's faithfulness, especially if you've been delivered. I want a faith like that. This story is one of many that proves that God is faithful to deliver us on his time according to his will. And that will and that timing is worth putting your trust in. So let's pause for a second. If we're going to put our trust in God's will, in God's timing, that implies that the ship has sailed on our own will and our own timing. If you think that you can say a certain set of words to take control of God and make him do your bidding, you are grotesquely mistaken. I don't know if grotesquely is the right word there, but it just felt right. Like you are it's disgusting how wrong you are. You aren't in charge of God. You do not command his forces. He does. You yield to him. He might use you as a vessel, even to speak a position of authority in other people's lives, as I am doing right now, right? But that's not me taking control from God. See, not if I'm doing my job right. I sincerely pray that if I say anything wrong, that God would just stop me. Chuck always prays, Lord, if I say anything false, help people forget it. I like that, Chuck. But here we are. It's his will and his timing. So let's pick up context here. You know what? My memory is really hazy. But on the note of prayer, I don't know if I prayed at the beginning. And if I did, I'm going to do it again right now. If I didn't, then we're going to do it. So let's pray. Lord God, thank you so much for today and for who you are and what you've done. God, I pray that as we read your word this morning, that you would speak to us, God, that you would convict us where we need to be convicted. God, I pray that all the words that I say would be from you and that you would stop me from saying anything that isn't from you. And that this would be something that builds us up. Lord, I pray for all of us as Waypoint Church that we would put our faith and our trust and our hope in you alone. In your name I pray, amen. So we've got this story. By the way, if you're joining us for the first, second, or third time, we've actually been going through a book of the Bible, and by now you should be able to guess what book that is. It is Exodus. There's also these signs on the wall, okay? We took a little break because we had Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and Easter, and there's more, to borrow a term from Tim, on-the-nose subjects that we can talk about on those days. But where we had left off was with the Passover. Okay, Tim had a message to us about the first Passover meal that the Hebrews partook in, and this was at the end of the plagues. So we had the plagues where God basically took an opportunity and used Moses as his vessel to prove that he was in control of the forces of nature and to punish Pharaoh for enslaving the people and to get this stubborn, disgusting dictator to release God's people from the slavery that they had endured for hundreds of years. Okay? So Pharaoh finally buckles under the pressure of the plagues and yields, and they are finally going to leave Egypt. The Israelites are finally going to leave Egypt here, and they're going to be a free, successful nation where everyone is happy and joyful and grateful all the time, and they are never going to not trust in God again. That was sarcasm. Yes, thank you. Yeah. No, they're gonna do this again, guys. They're gonna doubt again. And it's easy for us to sit here and be like, these Israelites, he parted the Red Sea and they still don't trust him. We do that. We do that constantly. But let's just keep that in mind as we read. Okay, but regardless, they're leaving Egypt and they're actually feeling pretty good. So we're going to read a lot of scripture this morning, I'm excited about that. It's less outlining for me and more of God's word just just being in the space, right? So let's read. I'm in 13. I'm going to start in verse 17, and we're going to read a bunch of this journey of the Israelites leaving Egypt, and unpack a few things along the way, and it's going to be good. So I'm in verse 17 here. It says, "When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they faced war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up and out of Egypt, ready to battle." Little side note here. This line where God says, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. When I don't know about you, but when I read that line through my modern lens and my modern, how I understand English language and stuff like that, it sort of gives the vibe that God's not really sure what's going to happen. It sort of makes it sound, he's like, well, they might do this, they might do that, I don't know. I just want to remind us that there was never any risk. There was always zero risk that God's plan was not going to unfold. Does that make sense? God was not derailed, and he's not worried that he's going to be derailed. If he is, we are all in huge trouble. Okay? Don't take this line to mean that God is uncertain. What I take it to mean is a reminder that God, and I like this, being a casual gamer, is strategic. He is seeing all the moving parts in this whole journey. And he didn't just blow up all the dangerous nations and just physically grab Israel and stick them in the promised land. No, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? He had a plan, and he knew the dangers and pitfalls along the way. And here's the best part. He knew exactly where and when he was going to be glorified. Okay? And that's part of this. God is recognizing that they can't go up to the Philistines, because that's a bad idea. He's got a plan to lead them in a different direction, and that's why that's there. It's to remind us that God knows what's going on. So the Israelites leave, they have fresh faith, and they are ready to fight. I kind of like that, right? Even though they've been in slavery for like 400 years, they're feeling good and ready to fight. They just watched all the plagues happen, and they're like, our God is for us. Let's go. Who's going to come at us next? We're ready. So right now, their faith is, they're feeling good. They're trusting God, okay? But challenges are coming. I'm going down to verse 20 here, again, chapter 13. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. I'm going to pause there for a second. So we've got this image of God leading the people via a pillar of fire and smoke. Okay, and what did that look like? I've seen different artistic renderings. Sometimes it's dramatic and big, like a giant fire tornado. Sometimes it's more subdued and seems like it's more just kind of a force of nature, sort of a storm leading them. I don't know. It says it's a pillar of fire and a pillar of smoke, and that the people were following it. So we've got Egypt behind, people of Israel traveling, pillar of fire / pillar of smoke leading them. Okay, elsewhere in Exodus, this pillar is referred to as the angel of the Lord, okay? And it is leading, so it is in front. So even though Moses is leading the Israelites, they're actually kind of following God in person at this point in time, which is wild to think about. If those of you that know your Old Testament and you know the journey that the Israelites are about to embark on, you know that they go through different phases of who they trust and who they follow, and all of it has to do with what? Them not putting their trust in God. But at this moment in time, they're kind of following God directly in a way, which is kind of wild to think about. And it is in front of them, showing them where to go. Now I'm in chapter 14, verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea, directly opposite Baal-Zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. So God's strategy here is pretty simple. Demonstrate his supremacy by humbling the powerful. How many times have we seen God do that throughout history? He sees somebody who thinks they can be a world dictator, and he humbles them. He sees somebody else, he sees somebody worshiping a false god, he takes care of that. He lets us know that he is the one and true God. He showed through the plagues that he was supreme over all of Egypt's false gods, and he showed Israel that they could trust him. And now he will show them once again that Pharaoh and all of his military might is utterly powerless against him. Verse 5, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services. Again, I don't know if this is just the English translation, but that sounds so like bureaucratic. We have lost their services. Like that's like a monopoly card. You have lost the services of the Israelites. Listen, Egypt was a massive and successful nation. It's not that hard to be successful when, 80% of your workforce, you don't have to pay them anything. They're your slaves. Egypt was a great, powerful, militaristic nation that got where they got on the backs of slaves. And God recognized that, but these were his people, and he saved them from slavery. Now, I didn't say this in first service, but I realized that there might be a parallel there that you might draw in your mind to other nations, plural, that have benefited from slave labor in their history. There's a right way and a wrong way for a nation to respond to this. The right way is to acknowledge the injustice that was done and then move on. Egypt didn't do that, okay? Now, we could have an argument about the current state of things in the United States, Great Britain, Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Other free nations that have history that have slavery in their history. We could have a discussion about that and is there something that's supposed to be done right now about that? I am not opening that can of worms right now. But collectively, I feel pretty good saying that we reject that part of our history and that we're not about that business anymore, right? That was evil. That was detestable. That was disgusting. To do that to people, to own people, that is absolutely wrong for any reason, be it prejudice or misinformation, it doesn't matter. Well, Pharaoh and his army, they were not feeling that way. They said, no, actually, we liked having those slaves and we want them back. And so they chase them. We have lost their services. Verse 6, so he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they encamped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. So their plan is working. Now the Israelites are staring at an army, and suddenly trust begins to falter. Okay, remember at the beginning when I said if you're stuck between an impassable sea and the greatest military force on earth, that's exactly where the Israelites are at this point in the story. And the Israelites trusted in God. No? Okay. I'm testing you. I do this to the teenagers, okay? You guys, you're good sports. I appreciate it. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone and let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Now, prior to the Red Sea parting, the Israelites could speak of God's provision thus far, but doubted his deliverance. They could look back at the plagues and what had brought them there and said, see, God is faithful. But at this moment in time, their faith was wavering. Now, I don't know if it was like percentages, what group of people, was it just a few of them that were grumbling, all of them? I don't know. But there was enough of them for it to be in Scripture, and so here we are talking about it. They longed to go back to slavery. 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of talking about the story of Lazarus, who was raised from the dead. Remember what Jesus said to Lazarus, Lazarus, come out of the tomb. And then he told everyone else, take off his dead man's clothes. He's not a dead man anymore. Imagine Lazarus walking out of the tomb and then saying, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to keep on my dead man's clothes. I'm going to go back into my tomb, lay down, and stay dead. No. He walked out of the grave. He walked out. Some of you have walked out of graves. In fact, as Christians, we all have, but some of you have a story about something that you walked out of. You walked out. Some of you have walked on dry ground across the Red Sea with a wall of water on either side. And I think some of us, maybe, are longing to return to the slavery that we've been saved from. Sometimes freedom doesn't seem as comfortable as slavery. Suppose I were to offer to you a prison. Hey, you can come and stay in my prison. You don't want to? I'll give you all the food you could want. It's basically going to be a 5-star hotel. You'll have a spa, hot tub, servants, whatever you want. It'll be the nicest place you've ever stayed, but you will be my property. Now, we can talk philosophically, like, well, we could solve world hunger if we did that. I don't know. Like, we could talk about that another time, but regardless, the point I'm trying to make here is that freedom is still better, okay? I don't want to go all patriotic here, okay, but there's a founding father that I like to quote, Patrick Henry. This guy was crazy. You know why he was crazy? Because he said, give me freedom or give me death. This guy thought he didn't care what subjugation, how good it might be. He said, I would rather walk free, and if I can't walk free, I'd rather be dead. So, I don't want to unpack that whole era, but here we are. I think there's something for us from that. And that as believers, walking in freedom is better than whatever comfortable slavery you've been saved from. Okay? And by the way, if anybody here is connecting the dots going, well, wait a minute. Isn't like a perfect environment where everything is provided for us? Isn't that something God promises us? Yes, it is. And is there anyone else we can trust for that? No, he's the only one. I'm really thankful for that. I'm really thankful for that. Because when I look at history, like, look, we've tried every political system or agenda that there is. We can look and see the pros and cons of capitalism, socialism, all the other isms that are out there. And why do they all fall apart? Because people fail. And we have our hope in a God who doesn't fail. Sometimes freedom doesn't seem as comfortable as slavery. Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of what? Slavery. He says, don't go back. Now, verse 13. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Now, something that I neglected to notate in my outline is that at some point in here, the pillar of fire moved from being in front of the Israelites to being in between them and the Egyptians. That's the only reason this story even happens. Otherwise, the Egyptians would have just killed them, right? So that pillar of fire moved. And in verse 14, Moses says, the Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. I don't know if Moses knew what was about to happen, but I can applaud Moses' faith in this moment. He recognized. He said, we weren't brought out here for nothing. We were not brought out here to die in the desert. We've got this big sea and this huge, scary army. God's going to do something. I don't know what it is, but something insane is about to happen, and I'm just waiting to see it. Okay? He says, you need only be still. Remember earlier we talked about when people are in despair and they cry out to God. When all of your faculties, all of your strategy, your brain smarts, your muscles, your bank accounts, when all those things fail you, if you are where God has called you to be, what is there left for you to do? Trust. Be still. God says to be still. The Lord will fight for you. You're staring at an army, God says, be still. By the way, this isn't an all-applicable scenario. This is to somebody who is standing directly where God wants them. God says that all things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. That is very important. Some people pull the first half. They like the first half. Oh, all things work together for good. That sounds awesome. Hold on. It's all things work together for the good of those who are called according to God's purpose. So if you are there, if you are walking in obedience, I think that is for you. At this point, Moses and the Israelites are where God wants them. And Moses said, be still. Sometimes we see God's provision and it's in the past tense. Like I can look back across my life and see like, look, God has provided. I can see where he's provided and he gets the glory. I can also see times in life where I was lacking, where things weren't ideal, where I was asking God for deliverance, and I trust that God was at work in that. Okay? Anybody can tell me how many years the Israelites were in slavery in Egypt? Anybody want to throw something? I don't have a number. 430? Got some 430. Over 400 years. Did you think any Israelites prayed to God for deliverance during that time? Yeah. And did he? When they wanted it to happen? And that's key. That is key. Our big, uncreated, timeless God is above that. And it's hard for us to trust that sometimes, especially when we're in the midst of that affliction. James says every good and perfect gift is from above. So when we look back and we see how God provided, he gets the glory. To call upon God the deliverer is to acknowledge your humble circumstances, even though they may continue. You have faith that deliverance is coming. Standing in the center of God's will, literally walking in obedience, waiting for the next move. If that's where you're finding yourself, the instructions couldn't be clearer. Be still. This takes me to Psalm 46. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Be still. Be still and know that I am God. You know, I think in any circumstance that advice can go a long way. Don't panic. Don't give up. Don't give up hope. Trust in the Lord. In verse 15, the Lord says to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. So this is the event. The event is coming. God is doing this for two reasons. Number one is obvious. He's doing it to rescue the Israelites. But number two is to demonstrate to the Egyptians his power over their gods. He says, they will know. If there was any doubt left, I don't know what the Egyptians back home are thinking, because they're the ones that are going to know. They're the ones that are going to see, that are going to understand kind of what happened here, right? Because Pharaoh and the soldiers are all about to be dead. They're going to know, and they should know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that their gods are little g, and that our God is big G. He is the one true God. And then in verse 21, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and their left. The sea was parted dramatically as the Hebrews crossed it, and we read of a similar story in Joshua 3. It's important to remember that the parting of the sea was not one swift act, but a sustained act. It wasn't like they were facing a monster and God just killed the monster and said, okay, danger has passed, you are good to go. I've read this story so many times. I was never struck by this until this time around, this week, when I was poring over this. When it says, all that night, the Lord drove the sea back. You see, parting the sea is one thing. Keeping the sea parted is another thing. A wall of water on either side. Imagine you're the Israelites and you see this event unfold in front of you, and your mind is blown, obviously. But then you see this like water canyon, right? And you're supposed to walk through that. And you're like, okay, God, yes, you did that, and that was incredible and powerful and crazy, but it would still be scary to walk in it, wouldn't it? Let's be real with each other here. Every step the Israelites took was an act of faith. Every step. They're walking, looking, like in the different artistic renderings and stuff that we've seen, you could see like fish through the wall of water on the side, that kind of, I don't know. And I really appreciate that artists take the time to try to imagine these things so that we can behold that. Like, I think it's really cool and valuable. Something that I thought of when I read this, all that night the Lord drove the sea back. But what if, I always thought of the parting of the sea as something that happened all at once. Like, boom, sea is parted. What if it happened as they went? I don't know. It says, all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. This is something that he was doing as they walked through it. What if it wasn't the whole sea parted at once? What if it was kind of parted in front of them as they walked? I don't know. But, thinking about that is powerful to me. And it reminds me of Joshua 3, the priests stepping into the Jordan River. They had to wait. God said, you got to take that first step. And they took the first step, and then the water was bunched up, right, upstream. Every step was a step of faith. But this was a sustained act. At some point in this story, the pillar of fire dividing the Egyptians from the Israelites is withdrawn. And the Egyptians take advantage, and they chase the Israelites onto the dry ground. And don't really know how close they got, but they try to take advantage. And then we get to verse 26. The Lord just said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and their horsemen. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back into its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. Worship team, you guys can make your way up here. I'm going to wrap this up. In verse 29, it says, but the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. I like to think that for a lot of the younger Israelites that were there, maybe they're children or teenagers that were with their parents, they're just kind of going wherever their family goes. They see this event, and that's where their faith is born. This wasn't something that could be explained any other way. They just watched two walls of water on either side as they walked through. This was an amazing event. And the nation of Israel at this point now has a foundation of faith to know that God is for them. And that story is giving to us so that you and I as believers can know that God is for us. As we put our trust in him, as we surrender to him, as we let him take control. So what's the take-home message here? The take-home message is this. Put all of your trust in the Lord. Not some of it, not most of it, all of it. Are you suffering from something? Are you in the midst of a trial? Pray for deliverance. Go ahead, pray. Like, drop down on your knees if you have to. That's what I do. Drop down on your knees and ask the Lord for deliverance. And when it happens, write it down. And by the way, if you're going, I've already done that, dude. I've experienced that. I've been delivered. Write it down. Tell somebody about it. You want to see something, you want to see social media used as a cause for good? Use that to share a testimony. Write that down and put that out there so someone else can see that. Okay? Tell someone. And as believers, and you might not be like, dude, I've never been miraculously healed from anything. I've suffered from lots of things, but I still trust in the Lord. I still put my faith in you. If that's you, you put your faith in the Lord. If that's you, you do have a story of deliverance, by the way. And we see that in Psalm 116, verse 8. It says, indeed, you delivered my soul from death, my eyes from crying, and my feet from stumbling. If you are here and you're a believer, you have been delivered from death. It's done. And you can walk in that victory. And don't yearn to return to slavery, but instead look forward and put your faith in the Lord. I'm not here to tell you what to think about God and the Bible. I honestly think that I'm just here to rustle things up a little bit so that you can go out and start preaching to each other. And that is my hope, that we would worship the Lord in our sharing of testimonies and praising him for his deliverance, because he is faithful. So let's worship him.